The alarm screamed through border station Epsilon 7 and felt his crystalline body vibrate with fear. The senior administrator had worked at this remote outpost for 30 cycles, watching the empty darkness of space beyond the galactic frontier. Nothing ever happened here, until today. His 6 optical sensors focused on the display screens that covered the command center walls. What he saw made no sense. The sensors showed ships, hundreds of ships, thousands of ships. They were emerging from the dead zone, the region of space that had been silent for 1,000,000 years. "Run the scan again," commanded, his voice creating harmonic tones that the translation system converted to galactic standard. "This must be an error." His assistant, a younger named, manipulated the controls with trembling appendages. "No error, Administrator. The readings are confirmed. It's them. The Ravagers have returned." The word sent waves of panic through every being in the command center. The Ravagers, ancient machines that had swept through the galaxy before any current civilization existed. They consumed everything, turning planets into raw materials, converting entire star systems into more copies of themselves. Then, mysteriously, they had vanished into the darkness beyond explored space. Now they were back. Watched the screens as more ships appeared. They were massive, dark shapes that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. Already, the sensors showed them moving toward the nearest asteroid field, their harvesting beams turning rock and ice into glowing streams of processed matter. "Send a priority alert to the Galactic Council," ordered. "Maximum emergency protocols. We need the defense fleet immediately." Worked frantically at the communications array. Minutes passed. Finally, the younger turned toward his superior, his crystalline structure flickering with distress colors. "Administrator, I cannot establish a clear connection. The Ravagers are generating some kind of interference. I can only send through the secondary relay network." "Then send it through secondary," said. "Send it through anything. The Council must know." Initiated the transmission. The message contained everything: scanned data, threat assessment, current position, and a desperate plea for help. 70,000 civilians lived and worked on Epsilon 7. They were scientists, families, children. If the Ravagers came this way, none would survive. The message encoded itself into quantum pulses and shot out into space, bouncing through the relay network that connected the scattered stations and worlds of the galactic frontier. It should have reached Council headquarters in 3 days. But the relay network was old. Some nodes hadn't been updated in centuries, and the secondary system had routing errors that no one had bothered to fix because it was rarely used. The distress call bounced from relay to relay, its path becoming more erratic with each jump. It passed through abandoned stations and forgotten listening posts. It traveled through regions of space that weren't even on modern star charts. Finally, after 6 days of automated routing, it found an active receiver. That receiver was Earth Colony Station Outpost 9, a heavily fortified position on the edge of human-controlled space. The communications officer on duty that day was Commander Hayen, a career military specialist who had spent 15 years learning alien languages and protocols. She was monitoring routine traffic when her console suddenly erupted with alerts. She studied the message carefully. The language was completely unknown, but the universal distress codes were clear. Someone needed help. Someone was in serious trouble. Hayen immediately forwarded the message to Fleet Admiral Min, aboard the battleship Indomitable, currently stationed 3 light towers away. Min was in his quarters when the alert came through. He was a tall man with hair and sharp eyes that had seen too many battles. He had commanded the Colonial Defense Force for 8 years, protecting human settlements in a galaxy that didn't particularly want them there. He read Hayen's report twice, then called for a meeting with his senior staff. Within an hour, his officers gathered in the command center. Hayen stood before them, displaying the decoded message on the main screen. This is everything we've been able to extract, she explained. The language is unfamiliar, but our AI has made some progress. The message mentions coordinates, massive threat, and urgent need for assistance. There are 70,000 civilians at risk. Where did this come from? Asked Captain Dong, a stocky Marine commander with scars on his face from the rebellion. We're not entirely sure, Hayen admitted. The signal bounced through so many relays that tracing the origin is difficult, but the coordinates provided point to a location about 3 weeks away at maximum jump speed. 3 weeks, Min said quietly. That's beyond our patrol zone. That's outside human territory entirely. Yes, sir, Hayen confirmed. So this message wasn't meant for us, said First Officer Bo Young, a sharp-faced woman who served as Min's tactical advisor. It was meant for whoever controls that region of space. Probably, Hayen agreed, but we received it and it's a distress call. The room fell silent. Everyone understood what was being discussed. Earth had only been part of the galactic community for 40 years. First contact had not gone well. Humans were from what the other species called a planet so hostile that the dominant species had to become aggressive just to survive. Most aliens feared them. Some wanted them quarantined. Responding to this call meant going far from home, into unknown territory, possibly making contact with new alien species who might not want human help. What do we know about the threat? Min asked. Dr. Mi-sun, the fleet's chief science officer, stepped forward. She was a brilliant woman who had studied every scrap of information humanity had gathered about alien civilizations. Very little, she said. The message fragments mention something called ravagers and reference extinction events and harvest cycles. Whatever is threatening them, it's not small. Min studied the star chart, showing the vast distance to the coordinates. He thought about 70,000 civilians waiting for help that might never come. He thought about the dangers of intervening in situations they didn't understand. Then he thought about what it meant to receive a distress call and do nothing. Prepare the fleet for immediate departure, Min ordered. Maximum speed to these coordinates. Have all ships go to combat readiness. We're responding to this call. Sir, Bo Young said carefully, we should probably report this to Earth Command and request permission. By the time we get permission, those civilians will be dead, Min replied. We'll send a report, but we're not waiting. Someone called for help. We're going to answer. Within 6 hours, the human fleet began moving. 5 battleships, 12 cruisers, 8 destroyers, and 3 massive transport ships carrying 5,000 colonial marines. It was a significant portion of Earth's military strength in this sector, all heading toward coordinates that might lead to anything. On border station Epsilon 7, watched the Ravager fleet grow larger with each passing hour. They had already consumed 3 asteroid fields and were building more ships. He sent message after message to the Galactic Council, each more desperate than the last. The Council responded with sympathy and promises to discuss the situation, but they sent no ships. No help was coming. Looked at his screens, watching doom approach, and wondered if anyone out there had received their distress call. If anyone in the galaxy still believed that some things were worth fighting for. The human fleet traveled through hyperspace like a school of metal fish swimming through an ocean of stars. Inside the battleship Indomitable, the crew worked around the clock, preparing for whatever waited at the end of their journey. In the linguistics lab, Wu sat surrounded by holographic displays showing fragments of the alien message. He was a thin man with tired eyes, someone who had learned 17 alien languages in his career. This one was proving difficult. Computer, play segment 7 again, he said. The alien voice filled the room, a series of harmonic tones that sounded almost musical. Wu listened carefully, making notes on his tablet. The AI had been processing the language for 2 weeks now, building a database of possible meanings. The word patterns suggest a crystalline species. the computer's voice reported. Communication through resonance frequencies rather than vocal cords. The message structure indicates high stress levels and urgent time constraints. Can you give me a full translation yet? Wu asked. Translation is approximately 73% complete. Main message content. Massive threat detected. Civilian population in danger, requesting immediate military assistance. Multiple references to historical precedent suggesting this threat is known to their culture. Wu pulled up the section about the Ravagers. This part of the message had been the hardest to decode, but the implications were terrifying. According to the fragments, these machines had once destroyed vast portions of the galaxy. They consumed worlds the way locusts consumed crops, leaving nothing behind. He sent his latest report to Dr. Mi-sun on the science vessel Discovery, which traveled alongside the battle fleet. Mi-sun received the report while examining what little data they had about the threat. Her laboratory was filled with screens showing astronomical records, ancient texts from various alien databases, and theoretical models of self-replicating machines. These Ravagers, she muttered to herself, they sound like a probe scenario gone wrong. Her assistant, a young ensign named, looked up from his station. What's a probe? A theoretical machine that can copy itself, Mi-sun explained. It travels to a star system, gathers resources, builds more copies of itself and sends them out to other systems. It's exponential growth. 1 becomes 2, 2 becomes 4, 4 becomes 8. Within a few centuries, a single probe could fill an entire galaxy. And these Ravagers are like that. Possibly worse, Mi-sun said. According to the message fragments, they don't just copy themselves. They actively hunt and consume. They're not exploring, they're harvesting. She pulled up a simulation on her main screen. It showed how a fleet of self-replicating machines could grow, spreading through space like a virus through a body. The numbers were staggering. If the Ravagers had been building for even a few months, they could already have thousands of ships. Send this analysis to Admiral Min, she ordered. He needs to know what we might be facing. 3 ships away, aboard the marine transport Horizon's Edge, Captain Dong was running his troops through drills. The cargo bay had been converted into a training area, and 200 Marines practiced room-clearing exercises. Faster, Dong shouted. The enemy won't wait for you to remember which way to turn. The Marines moved through the mock corridors, their weapons raised, their movements precise. These were men and women who had trained for every possible scenario: boarding actions, planetary assault, urban warfare, zero-gravity combat. But none of them had ever fought machines that could rebuild themselves. None had faced an enemy that had destroyed civilizations before humanity even existed. Dong's second-in-command, Lieutenant Park, approached him after the drill ended. "Sir, the troops are asking questions," Park said quietly. "They want to know what we're heading into." "We're heading into a rescue operation," Dong replied. 70,000 civilians need evacuation. That's all they need to know. "They're worried, sir. The rumors about these Ravagers." "Rumors are just noise," Dong interrupted. "Facts are what matter. Fact, someone needs help. Fact, we're trained to provide that help. Fact, we don't leave people behind. Understood?" "Yes, sir." Dong watched his Marines cleaning their weapons and checking their equipment. They were good soldiers, but he wondered if good would be enough. He'd read Dr. Mi-sun's reports. If even half of it was true, they were sailing towards something that had eaten worlds. But orders were orders, and humans didn't run from fights. Back on the Indomitable, Admiral Min stood in the command center with First Officer Bo Young, studying tactical displays. "We'll arrive in 4 days," Bo Young reported. "All ships are at 95% combat readiness. The Marines are prepared for evacuation operations. What are your orders when we reach the coordinates?" Min studied the star charts. The target system was far from any known human routes. According to their databases, No human ship had ever traveled this far in this direction. "We assess the situation first," he said. "If the civilian station is still intact, we make contact and offer assistance. If the threat is present, we evaluate whether we can engage safely." "And if we can't engage safely?" Bo Young asked. "Then we evacuate the civilians and withdraw." Bo Young nodded, but both of them knew it might not be that simple. Evacuating 70,000 people took time. If the enemy was present, someone would have to hold them off during the evacuation. Commander Hayen entered the command center, carrying a data pad. "Admiral, I've completed the communication protocols," she reported. "Based on Wu's work, I've programmed our systems to broadcast in their language. We should be able to establish basic communication when we arrive." "Good work, Commander," Min said. "What can we tell them?" "The basics. Who we are, that we received their distress call, that we're here to help. Wu says we should avoid complex sentences until we're sure about grammar and context." "Simple and direct," Min agreed. "That works for me." As the days passed, tension grew throughout the fleet. Every officer studied the limited information they had. Every Marine checked their equipment one more time. Every pilot ran combat simulations, preparing for battles they couldn't quite imagine. On Border Station Epsilon 7 watched the Ravager fleet with growing despair. The machines had consumed everything within 3 light hours of their position. Dozens of new ships appeared each day, built from the processed remains of asteroids and small moons. The Galactic Council had finally responded. They sent sympathetic messages and promised to discuss emergency funding for refugee relocation. They suggested begin evacuating the station immediately. But evacuate to where? The transport ships could only carry a few hundred people each. They had perhaps 15 suitable vessels in range. That meant saving maybe 5,000 people out of 70,000. Sent another desperate message toward anyone who might listen. He knew it was useless. The Council wouldn't send military forces. They would debate and discuss and form committees while his people died. He stood in the command center, looking at the screens showing the approaching doom, and made a decision. They would evacuate who they could. They would save the children first. And they would remember that when the darkness came, no one had answered their call for help. Meanwhile, the human fleet pushed harder, traveling at speeds that strained their engines. Admiral Min had ordered maximum velocity despite the risks. Every hour counted. In her quarters, Dr. Mi-sun compiled her final report. She had found references to the Ravagers in ancient alien texts, fragments of information from civilizations that had encountered them before. One phrase appeared repeatedly in different languages, different cultures. "The machines that end worlds." She sent the report to Min with a simple note. "Sir, we may be heading into something we're not prepared for. Recommend extreme caution." Min read the report in his command chair, his face expressionless. Then he looked at the countdown timer showing time until arrival. 3 days, 14 hours, 27 minutes. He thought about turning back, about keeping his fleet safe, about all the logical reasons to avoid this situation. Then he thought about 70,000 people waiting for help that would never come. "Maintain course," he ordered. "All ships prepare for combat operations." The fleet continued forward, carrying 5,000 Marines and 25,000 crew toward a threat they didn't understand, to save people they'd never met, because someone had called for help. And humans always answered the call. The human fleet dropped out of hyperspace exactly where the coordinates had indicated. For a moment, everything was silent as sensors scanned the surrounding space. Then the screens began filling with data, and everyone understood that they had arrived at something terrible. "Multiple contacts," First Officer Bo Young reported, her voice steady despite what she was seeing. "Counting 300 large vessels, unknown design, approximately 5,000 smaller craft. They're moving in formation around the fourth planet. Admiral Min stood in the center of the Indomitable's command bridge, watching the tactical displays. The enemy ships appeared on screen as dark shapes that seemed to absorb sensor beams rather than reflect them. They moved with perfect coordination, like a single organism rather than separate vessels. "Where's the distress beacon source?" he asked. "Station located," Commander Hayen answered. "Designated Epsilon 7, orbiting the third moon of the fifth planet. It's still intact but showing signs of defensive preparations. I'm detecting approximately 70,000 life signs aboard." "And the hostiles?" "They're currently harvesting the asteroid belt between planets 4 and 5, Bo-young reported. "Multiple mining operations in progress. They're building something." Dr. Misun's voice came through from the Discovery. "Admiral, those vessels match the theoretical profiles I sent you. Those are the Ravagers, and based on their current activity, they're in full expansion mode. Every few hours they complete another ship." Min absorbed this information quickly. 300 ships, growing in number every hour, versus his 25 vessels. The mathematics were not favorable. "Distance to the station?" he asked. 2 million kilometers, Bo-young said. "The Ravagers are between us and them. We can't reach the station without going through that fleet." "Then that's what we'll do," Min said. "All ships, battle formation Delta 7, prepare for combat approach." On border station Epsilon 7 had been coordinating evacuations when his sensor officer suddenly called out in alarm. "Administrator, new contacts emerging from hyperspace, unknown configuration." Rushed to the sensor displays, his crystalline body flashing with stress colors. More enemies. Had the Ravagers called reinforcements? But these ships were different. Smaller than the Ravager vessels but more numerous. They had strange designs, angular and aggressive, covered in weapons. "Are they with the Ravagers?" demanded. "Unknown, sir. Their energy signatures don't match anything in our database. They're positioning themselves between us and the Ravager fleet." "Broadcast on all frequencies," ordered. "Warn them away. Tell them the Ravagers cannot be fought." Worked frantically at the communication station. Moments later, a response came back. The translator struggled with the unknown language, but slowly words formed on the screen. "This is the Earth Colonial Defense Force responding to your distress call. We're here to help." Stared at the message. Earth. He had never heard of such a world. His species had been part of the Galactic Council for 8,000 cycles, and he had never encountered these beings. "Who are they?" he wondered aloud. Before anyone could answer, the sensors showed movement. The Ravagers had detected the newcomers. A swarm of probe ships broke off from the main fleet, heading toward the human vessels. "Oh no," whispered. "They're going to be destroyed." On the Indomitable, tactical officer lieutenant called out, "Admiral, 63 hostile craft approaching our position. Estimated time to weapons range, 4 minutes." "Are they attacking?" Min asked calmly. "Likely scouting," Bo-young answered. "They want to analyze our capabilities before committing the main fleet." "Then let's show them what Earth builds," Min said. "All ships activate point defense systems, target the approaching craft." What happened next shocked everyone watching from Epsilon 7. The human ships suddenly lit up like stars. Hundreds of point defense cannons activated simultaneously, filling space with streams of tracer fire. The Ravager probes flew directly into this wall of destruction. The machines were fast and maneuverable, but the human targeting systems were faster. One by one, the probes exploded in brilliant flashes. Within 90 seconds, all 63 were gone. Not a single Ravager probe had gotten close enough to fire a weapon. On Epsilon 7, watched in disbelief. They had fought the Ravagers once, centuries ago. Their defensive fleet had been annihilated. These strangers had just destroyed a scout force without taking damage. "Open a channel," he ordered. Commander Hayen received the incoming transmission and quickly routed it to Admiral Min. "This is Administrator of Border Station Epsilon 7, the translated voice said. "You must retreat immediately. The Ravagers are too dangerous. They cannot be defeated." Min activated his personal communicator. "Administrator, we received your distress call. How many civilians are on your station?" 70,000, replied. "But you don't understand. The Ravagers will destroy you. No force has ever stopped them. The only option is to run." "How long would it take you to evacuate 70,000 people?" Min asked. We can't. We don't have enough transport capacity. We can save perhaps 5,000. There was a pause. Then Min spoke again, his voice firm. "Then running isn't an option. We're going to hold this position while you evacuate your people." "That's impossible," said. "You're outnumbered 15 to 1. "We've faced worse odds," Min replied, which wasn't entirely true but sounded confident. "Begin your evacuation procedures, Administrator. My Marines will come aboard to assist." Before could protest further, the main Ravager fleet began moving. "Admiral, the hostile fleet is advancing," Bo Young reported. "All 300 ships plus support craft. They're forming an attack pattern." Min studied the tactical display. 300 enemy ships versus 25 human vessels. The Ravagers had superior numbers, but numbers weren't everything. "Captain Dong, how long do you need to evacuate that station?" The Marine commander's voice came through clearly. "Sir, if they cooperate fully, we can move 70,000 people in about 8 hours, but that's assuming no interference." "You'll have 8 hours," Min promised. "All ships, implement defensive screen formation. Protect the station at all costs." The human fleet moved into position. The 5 battleships formed the outer layer, their heavy armor and shields facing the approaching enemy. The cruisers and destroyers took supporting positions, creating overlapping fields of fire. The 3 transport ships, loaded with Marines, pushed forward toward Epsilon 7. "Hayen, send a message to that station," Min ordered. "Tell them to prepare for visitors. Tell them we're here to get them out." On Epsilon 7, watched the human ships moving into defensive positions. It was suicide. Brave, certainly, but ultimately futile. The Ravagers would sweep through them like a wave through sand. But these strangers were trying to save his people. People they had never met, from a species they had never encountered. They were risking everything based on a distress call that hadn't even been meant for them. "Prepare to receive their personnel," ordered his staff, "and organize all civilians for evacuation. If these humans, are willing to die for us, the least we can do is be ready." The Ravager fleet continued its approach. More ships appeared from the asteroid belt, fresh constructs joining the attack force. The total count rose to 350, 400, 450. On the Indomitable, Lieutenant watched the numbers climb. "Sir, they're still building ships even as they attack." "Noted," Min said. "Bo Young, what's their effective weapon range?" "Unknown, sir. We have no data on their capabilities." "Then we're about to get educated," Min said. "All ships weapons free. Fire when they enter range." The distance between the fleets shrank. 500,000 kilometers, 400,000, 300,000. At 200,000 kilometers, the Ravagers opened fire. Beams of concentrated energy lanced across space, striking the human ship's shields. The impact reports came in immediately. "Shield strength down to 85%, Tactical reported. "Their weapons are powerful but not overwhelming." "Return fire," Min ordered. The human fleet responded with everything they had. Rounds traveling at a fraction of light speed. Missile swarms with nuclear warheads. Particle beams that could cut through armor. Energy weapons that Earth had developed fighting megafauna on hostile colony worlds. The space between the fleets became a storm of destruction. And for the first time in a million years, the Ravagers encountered something unexpected. They encountered resistance. They encountered an enemy that fought back with coordinated precision and devastating firepower. They encountered humanity. The battle for Border Station Epsilon 7 had begun, and Admiral Min had no intention of retreating. Behind his fleet, 70,000 innocent lives depended on him. And humans didn't abandon people who needed help. Not ever. Space burned. The human fleet held formation as hundreds of Ravager ships poured fire into their defensive screen. Shields flared with each impact, creating brilliant cascades of light that illuminated the darkness. On the Indomitable's bridge, damage reports streamed in constantly. Forward shields at 60%, Lieutenant reported. Hull temperature rising in sections 7 through 12. Reroute power from non-essential systems, First Officer Bo-young commanded. Keep those shields up. Admiral Min watched the tactical display with calculating eyes. The Ravagers were good, efficient, relentless, but they fought with machine precision, following predictable patterns, and patterns could be exploited. They're concentrating fire on our battleships, he observed. They're trying to break through our heavy units first. Standard military doctrine, Bo-young agreed. Remove the strongest defenders, then mop up the rest. Then let's not be standard, Min said. Signal the destroyers. Execute flanking maneuver Omega-3. The human destroyers suddenly broke formation, accelerating hard to the sides. The Ravagers adjusted their targeting, but 8 destroyers moving at high speed were harder to hit than 5 stationary battleships. The destroyers came around the Ravager flanks and opened fire with their main guns. Rounds punched through Ravager hulls, while missiles found vulnerable points in their armor. 12 Ravager ships exploded in quick succession. But for every one destroyed, 2 more appeared from the construction zones. The machines were building faster than the humans could destroy them. While the space battle raged, the 3 Marine transports reached Epsilon 7. Captain Dong stood in the landing bay of the Horizon's Edge, watching his troops prepare for deployment. "Listen up," he shouted over the noise of preparing equipment. "Our mission is simple. Evacuate 70,000 civilians in 8 hours. We've trained for this. We're going to board that station, organize the population, and get them onto our transports. Questions?" "What if the Ravagers break through the fleet?" someone called out. "They won't," Dong said firmly. "The fleet will hold. Our job is to make sure their sacrifice means something. Now move out." The first shuttles launched, carrying Marines toward the waiting station. Had prepared docking bays to receive them, though he still couldn't quite believe what was happening. The first humans to board Epsilon 7 were a sight that they would never forget. They were tall, heavily armored, carrying weapons that looked designed to fight wars. Their faces were hidden behind helmets, making them seem more like machines than living beings. But when Captain Dong removed his helmet and spoke through Heian's translation program, his voice was calm and professional. "Administrator, I'm Captain Dong, Colonial Marines. Where do you need us?" Struggled to process the situation. These alien warriors had traveled across unknown space, were fighting a battle they couldn't win, all to save people they'd never met. "The civilian sectors," he finally said. 20,000 people in each of the main residential areas. They're frightened. Many don't want to leave their homes. "We'll handle it," Dong said. "My people are trained in evacuation procedures. We'll get everyone out." True to his word, the Marines spread through the station with remarkable efficiency. They went door to door, using translation devices to communicate. Their demeanor was firm but kind, professional but understanding. One Marine, Corporal Lee, found an elderly who refused to leave her quarters. "I've lived here for 40 years, the old woman said, her crystalline body flickering with stubborn colors. "I'm not abandoning my home." Lee knelt beside her, his armored bulk somehow gentle. "Ma'am, I understand, But there's a fight happening outside and we need to get you somewhere safe. Please, let us help you." Something in his voice, transmitted through the translator, reached her. She allowed herself to be led to the evacuation shuttles. Across the station, similar scenes played out thousands of times. The Marines worked tirelessly, carrying children, supporting the elderly, organizing the flow of refugees into orderly groups. But outside, the battle was growing worse. Strike Leader sat in the cockpit of her fighter, leading Red Squadron through the chaos of the battle. She was a veteran pilot with 12 years of experience, but she'd never seen anything like this. "Red 3 on my wing," she commanded. "We're going after that command ship." Dr. Mi-sun had identified what she believed was the Ravager command vessel, a massive ship at the center of their formation. It was coordinating the entire fleet through some kind of quantum communication network. If they could destroy it, the Ravager coordination might collapse. "Red Leader, this is command," Admiral Min's voice came through. "You're cleared for your attack run. Good hunting." "Copy that," Admiral replied. "Red Squadron, form up, we're going in." 20 fighters accelerated toward the Ravager fleet. Point defense fire filled space around them, and watched as Red 7 took a direct hit and exploded. "Keep moving," she shouted. "Don't give them a stationary target." The fighters wove through the enemy formation, their small size and high speed making them difficult to track. But the Ravagers were learning, adapting their targeting algorithms with each passing minute. Red 9 went down, then Red 14. "Almost there," said, watching the command ship grow larger on her screen. "Prepare EMP mines for deployment." The remaining fighters of Red Squadron released their payloads, specialized mines that would create electromagnetic pulses strong enough to disrupt quantum communications. Then the fighters turned hard, trying to escape the blast radius. Red 11 didn't make it. Red 5 exploded when a Ravager beam found her engine. Red 18 took damage and spiraled away, dying. But the mines detonated. The EMP wave washed over the Ravager command ship, and suddenly the enemy fleet's perfect coordination faltered. Ships that had been moving as one organism began responding independently, their timing off by crucial fractions of seconds. "It worked," Boyoung shouted from the Indomitable. "Their formation is breaking down." "Press the advantage," Min ordered. "All ships concentrate fire on their command vessel, take it down." The human fleet poured everything into the wounded command ship. Missiles, energy weapons, everything they had. The Ravager vessel's shields failed first, then its armor began to crack. Finally, with a brilliant explosion that lit up the entire battlefield, the command ship died. The effect on the Ravager fleet was immediate. Without central coordination, the machines began making tactical errors. Their perfect formation dissolved into individual ships acting on limited programming. But they were still dangerous, and there were still 400 of them. On Epsilon 7, Captain Dong watched the battle through the station's sensors while continuing to coordinate the evacuation. "Status report," he demanded. 42,000 evacuated, Lieutenant Park reported. 28,000 remaining, but the shuttles are running non-stop. They're starting to show mechanical stress. "Keep them flying," Dong ordered. "We're running out of time." Indeed they were. Despite the loss of their command ship, the Ravagers were adapting. They were building specialized ships designed specifically to counter human tactics. On the Indomitable, damage was mounting. "Forward shields are down," reported. "Taking direct hits to the hull. Sections 15 through 20 are open to space." "Seal those sections," Min ordered. "How much longer do the Marines need?" "At least 4 more hours, sir," Hayen answered after checking with the evacuation team. 4 hours. Min looked at the tactical display. His fleet was being ground down. The destroyers had taken the worst damage, with 3 already destroyed. The cruisers were barely holding together, and the Ravagers kept building more ships. "Sir," Bo-young said quietly, "we can't hold for 4 more hours. The fleet will be destroyed." Min knew she was right. The mathematics were clear. In 4 hours, there would be no human fleet left to cover the retreat. Unless someone did something drastic. "Commander Heian," he said, "have all non-essential personnel evacuate to the support ships. Skeleton crew only on the Indomitable." "Sir," Heian looked at him in shock. "You heard me, Commander. Everyone off except bridge crew and engine room." Bo-young understood immediately. "Admiral, you can't." "I can and I will," Min interrupted. "Those people need 4 more hours. I'm going to buy them that time." He turned to his tactical officer. "Lieutenant, plot a ramming course. Target, the largest concentration of Ravager ships, maximum speed." On Epsilon 7, watched in horror as the human battleship began moving forward, accelerating directly into the heart of the Ravager fleet. "What are they doing?" he whispered. Then he understood. The humans weren't retreating. They weren't giving up. They were sacrificing everything to protect people they'd never met before today. The Indomitable, Admiral Min's flagship, Earth's most powerful battleship, accelerated toward the Ravagers like a bullet aimed at the heart of darkness. And behind it, 70,000 refugees watched human beings prove that some things were worth dying for. The Indomitable plowed through space like a spear thrown by an angry god. In the command center, only 12 people remained. Admiral Min sat in his command chair, watching the Ravager fleet grow larger on the screens. First Officer Bo-young stood beside him, refusing to evacuate despite his direct orders. "You should have left with the others," Min said quietly. "With respect, sir, you'll need someone to handle tactical during the final approach," Bo-young replied. "Besides, I didn't join the Colonial Defense Force to abandon my admiral." Min smiled grimly. "Thank you, Commander." The Ravagers had detected the Indomitable's approach and were concentrating fire on the massive battleship. Energy beams scorched its armor. Missiles exploded against its hull. But the ship kept coming, its engines burning at maximum power. "Impact in 90 seconds, Bo-young reported. Min opened a channel to the rest of the fleet. "This is Admiral Min. Continue the evacuation. Hold the line. We'll buy you the time you need." Then he switched to a different frequency, one that reached Epsilon 7. "Administrator, it has been an honor to serve. Take care of your people." On the station, watched through tears that would have been impossible for his crystalline species if he weren't so overwhelmed with emotion. "Why," he whispered, "why would you do this for us?" But there was no answer. The Indomitable had cut communications, focusing all power to engines and shields for the final approach. 60 seconds. The battleship's armor was melting under concentrated fire, but its momentum was too great to stop now. 40 seconds. In the engine room, Chief Engineer pushed the reactors beyond their design limits. The engines screamed in protest, but they held together. 20 seconds. Min looked at Bo-young one last time. "It's been a privilege serving with you." "The privilege was mine, sir," she replied. 10 seconds. The Indomitable smashed into the center of the Ravager fleet, like a hammer striking glass. The explosion was massive. The battleship's reactors overloaded simultaneously, releasing energy equivalent to a small star. The shockwave expanded outward, consuming everything within 10,000 kilometers. 163 Ravager ships vanished in the fireball. The remaining Ravager fleet, already disorganized from losing their command ship, fell into complete chaos. The machines began making random tactical decisions, their coordination completely shattered. The human fleet, though battered and bleeding, seized the opportunity. "All ships attack pattern Delta 9, Commander Heian ordered from the cruiser Valiant, now serving as the fleet flagship. Hit them while they're confused. The remaining human vessels pressed forward. With the Ravager coordination broken, the battle became a series of individual fights. And in individual fights, human tactical thinking proved superior to machine programming. One by one, the Ravager ships were destroyed. On Epsilon 7, Captain Dong watched the battle turn while continuing to evacuate civilians. "How many left?" he demanded. 8,000, Lieutenant Park reported. "We can get them out in the next hour." "Double time on those shuttles," Dong ordered. "The fleet bought us this chance. We're not wasting it." The Marines worked even harder, moving refugees with desperate efficiency. Every shuttle was packed beyond normal capacity. Every trip counted. Finally, after 6 hours of continuous evacuation, the last civilian boarded the last shuttle. "All civilians evacuated, sir," Park reported. "Then get our people out too," Dong said. "Everyone back to the transports. We're leaving." The Marines in good order, boarding their shuttles and returning to the transport ships. Behind them, border station Epsilon 7 stood empty, a ghost station floating in space. The human fleet began its withdrawal. Of the 25 ships that had arrived, only 16 remained. The Indomitable was gone. 4 destroyers had been destroyed. 3 cruisers were barely functional. The surviving ships were all damaged, some critically. But they had saved 70,000 lives. 3 weeks later, the Galactic Council finally arrived at Epsilon 7. The Council fleet consisted of 20 diplomatic vessels and 5 light cruisers. They expected to find ruins and, if they were lucky, a few survivors. Instead, they found the human fleet still holding position, protecting the empty station while repair crews worked on damaged ships. Council Ambassador, a tall being from a species that resembled walking plants, stared at the sensor readings in disbelief. "They fought the Ravagers," he said, "and won." "Not just fought," his tactical officer replied. "They destroyed the entire Ravager fleet, 457 ships eliminated. The humans lost 9 vessels and took heavy damage, but they achieved total victory." Had been part of the Galactic Council for 60 years. He had seen many battles, many wars, but the Ravagers were supposed to be unstoppable. The standard protocol was to run and hope they went back into hibernation. Yet these unknown aliens had fought them and won. "Establish communication," ordered. "I need to speak with whoever commands that fleet." The channel opened, and Commander Hayen's face appeared on the screen. She looked exhausted, with dark circles under her eyes, but her voice was steady. "This is Commander Hayen of the Earth Colonial Defense Force. How can we help you?" "I am Ambassador of the Galactic Council," he replied. We came to assess the situation. We expected to find disaster." "The disaster was prevented," Hayen said simply. "We evacuated the civilian population. They're currently sheltering on our transport ships." "You evacuated 70,000 people while fighting the Ravagers." "Yes." Struggled to find words. That should have been impossible." "We had a good admiral," Hayen said quietly. "He made it possible." Over the following days, the Galactic Council conducted extensive debriefings. They interviewed the refugees, examined the battle data, and studied the human fleet. What they learned shocked them. These humans came from what they called Earth, a planet so hostile that it had created a species designed for survival at any cost. High gravity, extreme weather, dangerous predators, and limited resources had forged a people who refused to give up. The Council had never encountered a species like this. Most civilized races evolved on peaceful worlds where cooperation was more valuable than conflict. They had built a galaxy based on discussion, compromise, and avoiding danger. Humans came from a world where danger was everyday life, where fighting wasn't optional, it was survival. Dr. Mi-sun presented her analysis of the Ravager technology to the Council's Scientific Assembly. Her insights came from a perspective they had never considered. Where council scientists saw inevitable doom, Mi-sun saw engineering problems with solutions. The Ravagers are machines, she explained. Sophisticated, yes. Dangerous, certainly. But they're still just machines. They can be studied, understood, and defeated. But they destroyed entire civilizations. One council scientist protested. So did my ancestors' ice ages, Mi-sun replied. But humanity survived those too. You don't survive by running from problems. You survive by solving them. The debate in the council chambers was intense. Some species feared humanity, seeing them as dangerous warmongers. Others recognized the value of having allies who didn't run from fights. Ambassador soon represented Earth in these discussions. She was an older woman with hair and sharp eyes, someone who had spent 30 years in diplomatic service. The Galactic Council has a choice, she said during one heated session. You can see us as a threat because we're different, or you can see us as allies who answer distress calls. Your methods are violent, one council member argued. You lost nearly a third of your fleet. You sacrificed a battleship. This is not how civilized species operate. No, Sun agreed. Civilized species send sympathetic messages and form committees while innocent people die. We find that unacceptable. The silence that followed was uncomfortable. Finally spoke. The administrator had been invited to address the council. I sent a distress call, he said, his translated voice echoing through the chamber. I called for help when my people faced extinction. The Galactic Council sent messages of support and promised to discuss the situation. These humans who owed us nothing, who had never even heard of us, sent their fleet. They fought. They died. They saved 70,000 lives. He paused, looking around the chamber. You debate whether they're civilized enough for your council. I say this, they're more civilized than any of us, because when someone called for help, they came. The vote took 3 days. In the end, the Galactic Council agreed to establish formal diplomatic relations with Earth. They created a new joint defense initiative, recognizing that the galaxy needed protectors who wouldn't run from danger. On the human transport ship Horizon's Edge, Captain Dong stood in the medical bay, looking at the rows of injured Marines. 2,000 good soldiers had died in the battle, many more bore wounds that would take months to heal. Lieutenant Park approached him. Sir, the refugees want to hold a memorial service for Admiral Min and everyone we lost. They're asking if we'll participate. Of course we will, Dong said. Those people are alive because of our sacrifice. The least we can do is remember together. The memorial was held on Epsilon 7, now cleaned and reopened. 70,000 stood alongside 5,000 human Marines and the crews of the surviving ships. Commander Hayen read the names of those who had died, all 12 crew members of the Indomitable, the destroyer captains and their crews, the fighter pilots, the Marines killed during the evacuation. When she finished, stepped forward. We are a peaceful species, he said. We have no warriors, no soldiers. We build and create and explore. But today we learned something important. Sometimes peace must be protected. Sometimes civilization needs guardians. He gestured to the humans standing before him. We will never forget what you did for us. You came when no one else would. You fought when others ran. You gave everything to save strangers. This is the highest form of civilization we have ever witnessed. Months later, deep space sensors detected another anomaly at the galactic edge. Something large was moving, something ancient stirring in the darkness. The automated warning systems triggered, sending alerts across known space. On Earth, Fleet Admiral Park received the alert. She had been promoted after Min's death, taking command of the Colonial Defense Force. She studied the data, then turned to her staff. Prepare the fleet, she ordered. Someone out there is going to need help. Ma'am, we don't even know what the threat is yet. her tactical officer said. "Doesn't matter," Park replied. "When the call comes, we answer. That's what we do." The Colonial Defense Fleet began mobilizing, but this time they weren't alone. The Galactic Council had created the Joint Defense Initiative, and 15 species had volunteered ships and crews. The galaxy had learned a valuable lesson. Sometimes you need someone willing to fight. Sometimes you need the. Not because they're violent, not because they enjoy war, but because when innocent people are in danger, someone needs to answer the call. And humans always answered the call.